Hello, everybody. I'm John with JP Strategic Investments, and today I had the pleasure of speaking with Patriot One Technologies CEO Peter Evans. Patriot One Technologies is a company that specializes in covert threat detection through a variety of sensors, including magnets and cameras. I'll put a link in the description below to their website so you can check them out if you're not already a shareholder. This video will cater more towards current shareholders, but even if you're not a current shareholder and aren't familiar with Patriot One Technologies, this will give you a good picture of Peter Evans and his vision for the company going forward. If you are a current shareholder or you're just interested in the stock or the company after watching this video, I will be doing a follow-up video to this interview, just giving my thoughts and analysis on what Peter said in the interview once I've had a chance to rewatch it and really gather my thoughts on the interview. And now that we've got all of that out of the way, I'd like to introduce Peter Evans. How are you, sir?
Great this morning, John. It's good to see you. Thanks very much for the invitation to participate in your webcast.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Thanks for taking some time out of your day. Just want to start you off with an easy question here, but something that I think a lot of investors will still be interested in. What is it about Patriot One that excites you the most?
Wow, it's a great question to start with, John. I don't know how long it's been since I've been this excited about what I do. I really love what I do here. We've got a great company. We've got really good team here and really great engineers. But I think the things that are really compelling to me most is, one, I get really excited when we got some cutting edge technology. We're going through a digital transformation of this industry. What has historically been a labor-based business model with physical security guards, with physical walk-through metal detectors, and is going through a massive transformation. And every customer I talk to recognizes this and is in the middle of doing the analysis and evaluation. So one, I get really excited with, working on things like cutting edge technology. It kind of reminds me of like cyber technology when I was in cyberspace 20 years ago. It was new, it was leading edge. People were sort of exploring. They didn't quite know what they didn't know. And we had the opportunity, with the companies I was with, to really come in and help educate them and get them on the right journey on a new platform to address their problems. We're at the same sort of place right here. I guess the second thing that's really exciting to me is like the market's hot. And I don't know quite the best way of putting it, except an analogy I used before. Typically what you see when you're in a technology world and selling technology, you've got, a third of the customers, maybe early adopters, who are saying, wow, this is fantastic, let's go. You've got a third of the customers who are, they're kind of interested. You have to sell them hard. You have to build your ROI calculators. You've got to kind of go do a lot of pilots and things like that. And then you have a third of the customers who are saying, not for me. This is unlike anything I've seen before. 100% of all the customers I've talked to have all said, wow, let's have a conversation. Let's really get going here. Let's start doing an analysis on my stadium. So, great cutting edge technology with a market that's interested in exploring. So, those together make it a very, very busy time for Patriot One right now.
Well, that sounds good. Yeah, and I like that analogy. I know you've given it before, but it is, with your experience, I know you have a lot of experience in sales, so it's good to hear that sort of thing from you. The next one, you've talked about this before. One of your main customers is sports arenas or stadiums. And you've talked about the long sales cycle, what's involved with these customers, and how they can't just transition the whole stadium at once. Can you maybe elaborate on that a little bit more? And if you can think of any other barriers to entry with these sorts of customers or any other customers that maybe the average investor wouldn't be aware of, something like that can give us a better idea of, maybe how long it's going to take you to get into these customers or things that are holding you back from getting entry with these customers that maybe investors might not be aware of.
Yeah, it's a great question, John, and we get this all the time. I see some of the questions that come into our, investors at Patriot One email address, and that's a constant question. There was one a couple of months back, right after the January 6th events at our Capitol building, where everyone thought, well, why aren't we selling to every state capital right away? We should have that month had 50 sales. It doesn't quite work that way. I wish it did. If it did, boy, whoever's figured that one out should sell it to every technology company. It's an extensive process, right? And particularly when you're changing your whole business process and adopting new technology, and there's lots and lots of examples here. Think about when businesses all of a sudden decide to put Wi-Fi everywhere, right? All of a sudden they had to put in the considerations of, what does this mean to my IT infrastructure? What does this mean to exposures of data? What does this mean to compliance? What does this mean to hacking rights? What does this mean to privacy rights? And you see this over and over and over with adoption of technology. Companies put in something like Salesforce.com, and it takes them years to get it right? I spoke to, I think I mentioned this on the investor call. I spoke to one stadium security CSO. Now, this is someone who's highly, highly respected. Is probably one of the top two or three influential people in his pro league. And he said it took him 3 years just to get his walk-through metal detection policies right. And you think that's simple. I'm putting a piece of metal on the ground. But understanding the flow of the traffic, the people, how they move these things in and out of the building, how they get these things powered, training their security staff, half that security staff is churning all the time, right? And, they need to get it right. The last thing they want to do is get it wrong. Look at one of the issues with walk-through metal detectors. All of a sudden you have a long, long line. That becomes the target for someone with malicious intent, right? And so the folks are spending a lot of time figuring this out and trying to make it right. We're working with one hospital, and they had an unfortunate incident, and there was a shooting. And so we architected the whole thing out. We got it all right. We said, well, so where do you want the alerts to go to? And it kind of looked at us like I had three heads. What do you mean? It's like, well, security guards, SOC center, they hadn't even thought these things through, nor did they want to hire people and put them in all the entrances as security guards. So there's a lot of moving parts here that have to get figured out. The second thing is that same gentleman said to me in the stadium, he said, the last thing I'm going to do is flash cut in one piece of technology and have 60,000 fans screwed up and they miss the kickoff. All of a sudden, I've got a lot of ticket refunds that I'm going to be putting back into place, right? So people take things slowly and progressively. And typically what we're seeing is we'll start at one location, for argument's sake, a VIP entrance, and then maybe a player's entrance. We'll learn, we'll understand what's the impact, how people are going to use these things, how do they interact with them. And then we kind of grow and grow and grow progressively. That's the same history you've seen with technology adoption for any industry or any product, okay? The other thing about disruptive technology when we think about this is there's so much more that's coming out of this operational intelligence about how do people enter the building, what's the traffic flow, early insights that we can give them. And so people are thinking about how I can use this disruptive technology, not just to get people in the stadium better, but also optimize their overall operations, save costs, and those kinds of things, right? There's all sorts of similar examples here that we can talk about. Think about, I don't know, Netflix. Originally, Netflix used to send us all DVDs in a paper envelope, right? And then they shifted the whole model to online streaming. This paper envelope was a physical way of delivering a technology or service, just like a physical way of doing entry into a stadium, like walk-through metal detectors. All of a sudden, I'm going to a streaming service. I could think about, how do I bill people? How do I invoice them? Where does the data go? Am I protecting that data correctly? How do I, all these sorts of things that make you a digitalized e-commerce company. We're putting in place a digital platform that will provide a much better patron experience and a much higher level of security. And there's so much more involved than just shipping a different envelope.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, it seems fairly complicated, but it's one of those things where it seems like once you guys kind of build, like you've talked about the pipeline before,
Yeah.
even though there's a complicated sales cycle, once you have kind of that backlog, then that complicated sales cycle is maybe not so much slowing you down with sales.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
We will see momentum. I'll give a simple example. We're working with one stadium. It's one of the ones we signed in April, and they're going into one entrance. Okay. They know they eventually want to replace what they're doing with a walk-through metal detector with our technology. That conversation is there. But once we've kind of been in and proven, right, and they've worked through the security operations, then they've got the model, then the adoption rate should accelerate for that stadium. And then, of course, all the other stadiums will start to see that as the model. And what we're doing is we're learning from that model. We're writing white papers, so then we can show best practices to all the other stadiums and say, this is how to do things right, right? And so that should accelerate the sales activities. But like any early stage company, everyone's looking for someone else to be the leader, right? Let's have 5 other customers do this first, or let's have 5 of my peers do this first. And once I see how those 5 did, I'll learn from them, and then I'll accelerate further.
Gotcha.
Right.
All right. Well, speaking of those contracts, my next question. So you did announce in the last quarter's webinar that you've closed 4 contracts since the beginning of April. And in your words, these were long-term contracts. Can you give us maybe a little bit more detail as far as the size and length of these contracts? I know you can't maybe talk a lot about that. And also maybe what the typical contract length would be and things like that.
Sure. First thing I want to say though is I'm real pleased that we, very, very pleased that we're signing these types of contracts. We have a company have progressed from, testing and pilots to people betting and betting with a check and a contract. And so we're now into kind of the production phase of business, early stage, but we're in the production phase of business, which is good. But long term, what I mean by that is these are subscription model contracts versus a traditional install. Some people will buy a technology and pay an annual maintenance fee on top of that. And so you benefit from all the sale and the ratable revenue up front. The subscription model is something that typically in our case, it's about a 36-month contract with a 1-year auto renew on the back end of that. So, and what I've seen in my experiences, with SaaS companies and subscription-based models is those contracts just keep renewing and renewing and renewing as long as the customer is still happy. And our intent is to make them happy, which is why we dial things at the front end very, very carefully and spend a lot of time with the customer. There's a lot of advantages to kind of the subscription model. For me, it's much more predictable revenues versus choppy revenues. I mean, you can imagine being an investor. In 1 month, we sign $2 million contract, and the next month we sign a $500,000 contract. And you're going, wait a minute, whoa, there's this big drop. Versus, if I take a 36-month contract and it's delivering, as an example, $10,000 a month for a $360,000 contract, it's $10,000 every month. And the next one lays on top of it, and then on top of that, and then on top of that with each contract. So you get this kind of, gift that keeps on giving over time and very predictable revenues. It's also much easier for customers to get approved, that kind of a model, right? Instead of going for a very large approval up front, which might have to go all the way up to the CFO or the CEO, you're now using OPEX dollars, which are in the monthly operating budget, and it's much easier for them to adopt. So there's a much lower barrier to entry. So in terms of these contracts, typically about 36-month subscription contracts. I can't give the size and details of each one because we do have a degree of non-disclosures around those with the customers,
Mm-hmm.
And what we can and cannot announce. But as I think we talked about in the investor call, some of them were very small, 1 or 2 lanes. Some of them are about a 6-lane deployment, and so we're pleased.
All right, nice. And so just kind of, if I can follow up on that one,
Yeah.
investors are trying to determine, probably how much revenue is going to be coming in from these contracts. I know I'll be going through the earnings as I always do with a fine-tooth comb. So can you give us any insights as to, how you will report this revenue, whether it will be some sort of like annual recurring revenue or total contract value, some different things like that, so we can get maybe a better feel for how we should be evaluating your future earnings reports?
Yeah, the first thing I would look at if I was an investor, taking a look at, Patriot One's financials, I'd look at the bookings. What was booked within that month, right? And from there, you're going to get a good sense of like the total contract values that were booked, right? And then you'll start to see the kind of the sense of, okay, what does that look like in terms of ratable revenue on a month-by-month basis, which will give an indication. There'll be some things that you'll see in the financials where obviously, there's customers who will pay up front, right? But the big indicator I would look for is bookings, because that's giving a sense of the future business and future commitments to the company by the customers. At this time, we're seeing a lot of small deals. I think, as I mentioned on the investor call, that's okay. I'd rather work with the small investors, get things fine-tuned with that. Sorry, not investors. I'm sorry, small customers. Get things fine-tuned with those.
Mm-hmm.
And in some cases, as I said, it might be one entrance, get that fine-tuned with that customer so that he then is very comfortable moving on to the remaining entrances in his stadium.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds great. That'll definitely help us look at that. Definitely be looking at those bookings.
Yeah. John, one of the things that you mentioned, I'm sorry, I forgot to answer.
Yeah.
You sort of said, like, are we going to report specific contract value? Where we can, we will, or where we're mandated to. For example, some of the government contracts that we win, which get published, publicly anyways,
Mm-hmm.
we will announce it. But where we've got, the customer who is kind of prohibited us from announcing those, we obviously can't because we don't want to breach our relationship. And then I guess frankly also, I kind of don't want to give the competition our competitive pricing. If I'm competing with the competition for a deal and I win it,
Yeah.
and then they see that announced afterwards, they then know how they have to undercut me to win future deals. I'm not going to give them that advantage.
That makes sense. Yeah. I mean, I understand how, myself included, it's kind of, it makes it a little harder as an investor to evaluate that, but it does make sense, from the strategy of the company.
Yeah. I mean, if the world were perfect, I'd love to give every detail of every contract, but we can't. Right.
Yeah. So, kind of a little more on the revenue as well. Will you guys be breaking it down based on product mix at all, or will it just kind of be PAT scan revenue or something like that?
Yeah, ultimately, I'd like to break it down, just give people a little bit of an indication of where the market interest is,
Hmm.
but not in the short term for a couple of reasons. One, the mix is incredibly fluid at this stage, and we might find that the numbers are actually skewed inappropriately because of one customer. You can imagine if I signed four contracts and one customer is heavy, heavy VRS, and all of a sudden everyone thinks that that is kind of where we're winning. When in fact, what we're seeing in the marketplace, the highest area of interest is in the kind of the MSG platform and protecting the entrances.
Hmm.
And I was working on one contract yesterday for a customer who wants some, 200 units of VRSW, right, for their casino. In other cases, got customers who want, primarily just protecting the entrances, and they have no interest in VRSW. Some are a mix. Right now, because our base of customers is smaller and the
Hmm.
number of contracts that we're signing is smaller, I don't know that we'd actually get an accurate view of what we expect the future to look like. As we get a larger critical mass, and we start to see the trends kind of balance out, then I think it's fair for us to start giving that kind of indication to customers.
Okay.
One of the things, sorry, to the investors. I keep saying investors and customers. Um, One of the things I would like to highlight, though, when we think about the mix, I don't think, and our customers do not think of things in terms of an MSG and the towers, right? What they think of and what we are promoting and what we are selling is a solution. And that solution balances patron screening and patron experience. And that's been the problem in the industry. The more security we put in place with walk-through metal detectors that turned up higher and higher and higher, the experience has gone down, right? And that's been the issue,
Yeah.
right? The benefit, coming all the way back to what excites me about the industry and what you were talking about, is this digital transformation. The things that we've done with our AI engine allows us to have very high patron screening and very high patron experience, something the industry hasn't experienced before. And so we talk about it as an experience set, not a box. And that's what the customers are buying from us, right? They're buying
Gotcha.
those two things in balance. So, it's a little bit of a misnomer to say how many MSGs or how much VRSW. It's kind
Hmm.
of, okay, I'm taking care of your business with a solution.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, definitely from, a customer standpoint, they're they want the best customer experience,
Yeah.
and that means obviously security as well, but it does mean, the trade-off that you have to get between, customer experience and security.
Yeah.
Speaking of kind of that trade-off a little bit, you recently announced some improvements to your VRS system. And one of the major improvements was increasing the accuracy of the system to reduce false positives.
Mm.
Has this increase in accuracy had any effects on the speed at which the system identifies threats? I know you mentioned in the letter, I believe, or in the press release, that it has to verify with multiple camera angles, and so that way it reduces the false positives. But is that meaning it has to wait till the perpetrator moves into the field of view of another camera, and is that going to slow down how fast that system is able to actually send an alert to the threat?
Yeah, it's a great question, John, and it actually applies to everything we do. And it is one of our competitive differentiators when we look at the whole portfolio set is speed of detection and alerting. It doesn't make a lot of sense if somebody, for example, walks through the MSG gateways and you're not alerting until 4 seconds later. That's a non-starter when you're trying to get 60,000 people into a stadium, and kind of some of the issues we talked about before about operations, right? So, we need to alert within milliseconds. It's the same thing with VRSW. And, I'm pleased to say that like our alert rate is within milliseconds. What we're doing is we're just continuing to refine the system to lower those false positives. So can I look at things like, is a person walking to or from, the building? Because if they're walking away, they're not an issue. Can I look in and recognize, is this person a police officer? So there's certain indicators like a badge or the word police on their jacket that, I can lower false positives. Can I look at certain behaviors? Is the gun sitting on a table or is the gun in someone's hand? Right. And all these things are things that we're correlating to make sure high accuracy, low false positive rates, but with a primary mantra being fast. I mean, it's probably the best way to say it is that like when the stadiums are looking for, what the customers are looking for, the schools, the retail stores and things like that, is I want 99.9999% accuracy and a great experience, right? So they bias towards accuracy and security first, while then making sure that the things are, wrapped up in a proper experience for the customers. The announcement is also highlighting a couple of other things, so that the speed is not declined. It's just really within that envelope doing more to improve accuracy. The other points of the announcement were sort of threefold. We're also, finding that in some conversations with customers, they're very worried about the camera infrastructure that they all have in place. We wanted to send a strong signal to, schools, retail organizations, places that have experienced a crisis, that we can operate on any camera system. That is not a barrier to entry. A Vigilon only works on a Vigilon. It's a great product, right? Other camera companies only work on their camera, Axis, Hanwha, Dahua, any of these guys. We work on anybody's product. And so there's a very quick adoption cycle for anyone who's looking to protect their school or their retail organization, right? And to kind of up level this kind of knowledge. Not only do we want to put that out, that press announcement out, we want it to be part of what is about to be a new marketing campaign that we're launching around trying to get that product into the hands of folks. There's a crisis going on in this country right now. We saw this event in San Jose last week. There was another one in Miami. This is just going on and on. We have a solution that can deal with the large proponents of that or component of that on existing camera systems. So let's get it out there in people's hands and start protecting the country. The other thing that we wanted to make sure we announced with that was the enhanced capabilities. We've got customers who are asking for things like crowd counting or people counting and things like that, and starting to look at, okay, how can I improve that customer experience as people are entering gates for screening or once they're inside the gate, right? Are there things that I can do to improve the overall traffic flow and the overall experience? We wanted to make sure that message was out there too.
Yeah. Okay. And just a quick follow up since you mentioned that.
Yeah.
One of the things I was thinking about when you guys announced that the crowd counting, the kind of things aside from maybe general security that your system can also do as well. Have in your experience with customers, have you seen those things be more of kind of an icing on the cake, or are they at all in certain cases the main selling point?
It's a little bit of the icing on the cake, to be quite honest. And I had one gentleman, very, very influential gentleman. He's kind of a key influencer in some 37 stadiums or so. We were talking about this vision about, where does patron screening and patron experience start? Does it start at the moment that someone starts putting their reservation online to buy a ticket? Does it start at the moment they're on social media talking a bit about, I'm going to the game this weekend and I'm going to create trouble for all the fans because I'm the opponent? At that point, you're starting to get insights, and we can ingest that information into our platform and use it to actually provide advanced insights that become preemptive as I'm thinking about a good patron experience and good patron safety, right? As well as things like traffic flow, crowd counting, and things like that, both on approach to the stadium as well as inside the stadium. So the nice thing is we built out this AI platform. That was kind of that's our key differentiator that allows us to do weapons detection incredibly well, but has these other ancillary benefits. Most customers, and this one gentleman who I mentioned earlier, he made a comment to me, don't forget to keep the main thing the main thing. People are looking for keeping weapons out of stadiums. They're looking for keeping weapons out of casinos. And he said, make sure you do that well. You guys are beating the market in that. You've got the most advanced technology that's out there. Let's keep working on that and then wrap these other things around it.
Makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. You want to stay focused on, one thing before you start just branching out and getting too spread thin.
If that's where people are spending their money, I'm going to go take that.
That's true. And kind of piggybacking off of that a little bit, talking about the false positives, talking about, customer priorities. Can you speak at all to, what the priorities of potential customers have been, especially in relation to, false positives? Is it something where they don't really care how many false positives they get as long as they get good security, or are they not necessarily willing to sacrifice that, and they want to make sure that they only really get the kind of 100% threats?
Yeah, this is kind of a bit of an age-old question here, John. And I'll go back to, again, cybersecurity. We had the same thing in cybersecurity with, and I think I mentioned this on the investor call also. you have the marketing organizations, sales organizations that want to put more and more and more experience in the customer's hands. I want to do online banking on my smartphone. Let's roll this out. Let's roll this out. In the haste to do that, security is oftentimes sub-optimized in the process, which is why you've seen unfortunate breaches in the cybersecurity world. The same thing could happen in this world of patron screening, right? If we were to let that happen. The DHS Safety Act and Safety Act certifications are kind of setting in place a mandate that all these stadiums have to become DHS Safety Act certified. It's a necessity. That's a long, arduous process. And I think it's a good thing though, because it's actually forcing the industry to make sure that security is a priority and it is not sub-optimized in the rush to have a great touchless, fast, frictionless experience. So, with that, I'd say that, most of the people I've skewed towards, they want the highest level of security, even if it might cause some delays for the patrons. But think of it this way. Right now, 100% of the patrons are getting screened. 100% of the patients, therefore, by definition, are a false positive. And if you have to get screened a second time because my belt buckle, alerted during the walkthrough metal detector, say 30%. Well, 130%, you're getting 130% false positive rate, right? You don't really need to screen all those people, do you? So most of the folks are looking at this and they should kind of change their mindset to say, well, okay, if I can achieve the same level of security or better security, right? But I'm only dealing with 10% alerts instead of 130% alerts, I'm 120% better experience for all those patrons as of today, right? And so you have to almost think of it slightly differently and a different kind of approach and not look at things just kind of independently as a silo. Oh my gosh, you're 10% false positives, 5%, 2%, 12%, whatever the number happens to be for that stadium, right? You have to look at it in context of what the two alternatives are, right?
Gotcha.
One alternative, 100% friction, 100% touch, 100% contact in a COVID world, 30% rescreening, 500 people an hour. Some very, very large percentage just walk right in and have a great experience, and a small percent go through what they would have gone through anyways.
Awesome. So yeah, that actually makes sense. I didn't even think about it that way. So basically, you're saying because your system, the average person that walks through takes even less time, a fraction of the time than what the regular person walks through now, you could even potentially have a higher false positive rate than, say, the regular metal detectors and still be faster than the regular metal detectors.
Yes, but not quite. I'm going to adjust the thinking just a little bit. We're having people walk through at a pace of a second and a half on average. Let's call it that, right? Where the average walk through metal detector is probably 9-ish seconds per person.
Okay.
So first off, that's a better experience for me as an individual. Okay. Yeah. I'm in a second. I'm not in 9 seconds waiting in line for 20 minutes for the guy at the front of the line who forgot to take the keys out and went, oh yeah, right. We've all had that experience. It's like, come on, guys. All right. So that's thought number one. Thought number two is depending on the environment. And I always want to be cautious with putting out numbers because you balance throughput, detection rate, alert rate, the electromagnetic interference in the air, all these sorts of things have to be taken into consideration. It's like an algorithm, right? And once you figure that out for each stadium, for argument's sake, let's say a stadium had 10% of the people were going to alert just because of combinations of metal, the interference from other systems, whatever, right? That means that 10% of the people will be asked, excuse me, sir, can you empty your pockets? Versus 100% or 130% of people being asked, excuse me, sir, can you empty your pockets? So 90% of the people in that example, have a contactless, fast, frictionless, just walk on through. It's the smaller percentage that's actually going to take 9 or 10 seconds to say, oh yeah, I forgot my phone here and my keys, and I've got this Swiss Army knife. Oh, and I've got this Glock in my pocket. Okay. So you want to catch that. Well, you'd be surprised. We were at a stadium about 3 weeks ago, and there was someone trying to sneak a handgun in on their purse, even though 100% of the people there knew no weapons.
Really?
Right. And I'm very pleased to say not only did we catch that, we caught a bunch of Leathermans and Swiss Army knives and things that were just contraband, not allowed.
Nice. So if I could switch gears for a second here and talk about extract specifically, it's been the main source of your revenue lately. So can you give us any more information about these new contracts that were announced by the Canadian government, and just how you see extract fitting into the business long term?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we're putting out formal announcements about those contracts. We are surprised a little bit. The government moved a little faster than we expected them to. Normally, we have to announce after them.
Government never
But
moves fast.
yeah, so here's where the value is in extract. I mentioned earlier that our AI engines are our sweet sauce, right? Special sauce. That's our sweet spot. That's something we do that's very unique in the industry, much better than anyone else. And the way AI works is, and there's a lot of companies who claim AI. I'm waiting to go to my grocery store one day and see a box of Tide detergent that says now with AI, right? It's been overused by marketing individuals to try and drive traffic to their website, and it's causing a lot of confusion with customers. AI works well if you pick a specific target and do it very well. You need access to unique data for that application. So in our case, what's going on in a stadium, what's going on at a casino, getting that kind of data and about the individuals, the patrons, the traffic flow, all these sorts of things. Then you have your AI engines that discern through that to get actionable intelligence, and then software on the top that creates something in a consumable format. So if I'm doing patron screening, I need to be able to deliver outputs in a way that's consumable by the security organizations for the things they are looking for. Okay. If they're looking for break-ins in cars in a parking lot, as an example, right? Then I better have a lot of data about what normal behavior looks like with people around cars. And I better have a piece of software sitting on top of the AI engine that's saying, okay, there's a person in this car, in this parking lot at this spot. AI's got to have those elements to it. Extract brings us unique capabilities around AI that allows us to kind of bring forth this vision that we talked about a more robust, patron screening, patron experience application. The kinds of projects that we're winning with government, are great because they're taking advantage of that platform we already have, and they're funding us to do things that will meet some of their needs and then grow into bigger projects with them, but also contribute to where we're going with the vision and the strategy of the company anyways. So we don't want to take on these one-off projects that are kind of orphans somewhere. They're things that are creative to the overall business model and helping it accelerate. So for example, this last one with the government, which was all around native language processing, so text recognition, so I can understand on social media if people are, talking maliciously about something. Stadiums are interested in that.
Okay.
Casinos are interested in that. Casinos are interested if someone is planning to plan a robbery, for example. And so that adds to our platform as well as to a certain degree addresses the need of the government. So Extract is, very purpose-built, right? And it's giving us a significant competitive advantage right now. And they're very aligned to what we're doing as a business.
Nice. Question I was actually going to ask a little bit later, but since you mentioned, getting that data and having access specifically around stadiums and things like that, you recently announced the partnership with, NCS4 Technology Alliance, the 2021 NCS4 Technology Alliance. Can you give us any more details as to why this is really important and what advantages this offers to Patriot One? And is one of those advantages getting maybe more access to data like that could improve your AI engines?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of benefits. First off, I want to just call out the NCS4 organization. They are a fabulous organization, and it's a pleasure to be invited to work with them. They're very objective in what they do. They're not aggressively promoting technology, saying we like X, not Y. They're very objective, and they're looked at by all the industry, the sports entertainment organizations, live concert organizations, NCAA, everything from monster trucks to pro sports, right? They all look to them as a source of objective insights to help them on their journey to adopt technology. And I look at the webinar that we did with them. They typically have 50 people attend. We had 400.
Wow.
And these were the who's who that of people. And I think within a day we had an inbound call. And we got a pilot going with one of the pro teams.
Nice.
It's great access. And the intent of that webinar was to be like thought leadership, not aggressive product promotion, but helping people on their journey as they make the transition. And so we're now accelerating that transition. They're the source for stadium security, period. I mean, people look to them, and we think we can help drive adoption of stadium security, through groups like the NCS4. Okay. As part of the Technology Alliance, there's partner companies in there that we're now working with that we think will help to adopt some of the technologies also. You look at companies like, I as an example, Access Technologies and what they're doing, who are part of the alliance with processing at the edge, which makes cameras faster, better, and can only improve the RSW as an example. So there's a lot of benefits both from technical integration as well as helping the industry adopt faster. You know, so that's kind of my quick reaction to that. I like them a lot. I like what we do with them, and I'm really pleased that we're working with them.
Nice. And just if I could touch on a point you made about the thought process and things like that. Have you noticed at all? I was just kind of thinking, walking through a stadium and not having to take things out of my pockets. Have you noticed at all in your tests that people maybe are a little bit confused when they first approach that, and they're like they have their their stuff and their what do I do and
Oh
anything
yeah,
like that?
absolutely. I think I might have talked about this on the investor webinar also.
Hmm.
So we were at one of the stadiums that was holding their commencement activities for all of their students, and it was a great way to kind of trial and test the technology with some 9,000 people going into the stadium and helping them understand their security operations. The
Hmm.
product worked incredibly well. I was really, really pleased. And what we learned from it was, boy, there's a lot of time that's needed to train the security staff and also the customers.
Yeah.
Even though we were talking to people as they were walking up and guiding them and saying, just walk right through, things like people didn't know what to do. They were taking out their
Uh-huh.
cell phones and they were putting their hands above their head and they were turning around in circles. And
People are very well trained already.
it was strange behavior. It really was. But what it tells me is adoption of new technology is easy. It's not easy. People tend to know what they know and they've known for years. And so sometimes instead of like moving, flashing to another technology, you got to do something that looks a lot like what they've already experienced before. And then once they're in it, then you kind of, take them along the path, right? So yeah, it's an interesting experience being in some of these stadiums and some of these casinos and watching the patrons' behavior. I almost feel like you have to have like massive signs in
Yeah.
the parking lots or something to help people know what to do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like you said, it's something that once people start to get used to it, then that'll be the thing that they're trained to do, and we'll go from
Yeah.
there.
Think about it this way. The first walk-through metal detectors came out, what, 15, 20 years ago, right? Prior to that, it might have been pat downs. In fact, I was talking to a gentleman who was at the old Candlestick Park.
Hmm.
And he said, yeah, people started with pat downs and then wands and then walk through metal detectors, right? Can you imagine like when all of a sudden, someone's like standing there wanding you and all of a sudden you're going through a metal detector and you've never
Yeah.
seen one before?
Hmm.
Similar sort of thing. But that's okay. It's like, when I give my dad a smartphone and, he's used to sending me notes on a fax and he kind of looked at my smartphone like it was the Rosetta Stone and didn't know what to do, right? It's just a
Yeah.
matter of time.
So to switch gears again a little bit. You mentioned in your last letter, your last shareholder letter, that you were currently discussing security with a few schools and government buildings in 3 states. I know
Yeah.
you can't probably give us too many details on this, but I have to at least ask, can you give us any updates or any new information on this, or maybe anything with other states?
Yeah, well, the intent here was couplefold. First off, trying to sell school by school by school is incredibly difficult. And so the idea was, why don't we go up higher? Let's go into the top of the retail organization who's got 2,000 stores. Let's go into the top of the state level to the whoever runs all the schools and say, look, we've had enough of these shootings. Let's just talk about protecting all the schools at once, protecting all the retail stores at once.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the intent, and building a program and kind of an enterprise license to make that very consumable and adoptable for them. But like anything, government moves slowly. You've got budgeting processes, you've got grant money, you've got to apply for the grants, then they, have to be equal to everyone. So they want to put out an RFP. And then when the RFP is assigned, there's people who contest the RFP saying they didn't have a fair shot. Government moves slow, unfortunately. I'm a monumentally impatient person. I like to get things done yesterday. And government is not monumentally impatient, unfortunately. So we're still involved in the conversations. We're still pushing on them. And we will unfortunately have to work at their pace instead of our pace.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Makes sense. I like I said, I just had to ask anyway.
Yeah, of course.
I know we're getting a little past our time. Do you have time for a couple more questions?
I do, of course,
Okay.
always.
Sweet. With the majority of your customers, and you've talked about this before, having non-disclosure agreements, um, for obvious security reasons, you're kind of handicapped in a way as far as your ability to kind of lean back on maybe previous customer wins to market your brand and to grow sales.
Mhm.
What marketing strategies do you use to combat this? And do you expect to be able to use any customers with NDAs maybe as references in seeking out future customers?
Yeah, it's kind of a really kind of a strange case by case basis here. On the one hand, we do have some customers who actually want to talk about the technology at the time where they're getting it kind of deployed in a more broad manner, because they want to send a message to their customers. It's okay to come to the stadium again. We're safe. We'll take care of you. So it's a good branding opportunity for them. And at the right time, when they want to go do case studies and publish those things, we will. Okay. In other cases, there's other stadiums who take an approach very similar to cybersecurity. In the cybersecurity world, it's almost impossible to get a customer to do a case study or announcement. Why? Because they don't want to broadcast out to those with malicious intent and hackers. Here I am, I'm using XYZ firewall, come and attack me and see if you can get in. So it's true. This happens all
No,
the time.
yeah.
Yeah. And so and some of the stadiums are like that also. They don't want to let people know all the measures they've taken because they don't want to tip people off. There's always people trying to beat the system,
Yeah.
right? You see things when, again, at various places within various stadiums, you'll see people trying to, hide their knife behind their phone, hoping the metal detector won't pick it off. And then when it does, they'll pull out the phone and go, "Oh, it was this," and they still will have their knife in their pocket.
Mhm.
You see all these kinds of gamesmanship going on, so people
Mhm.
don't want to broadcast what they're doing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of the things I want to be very cautious about is that, look, I'm not going to exaggerate customer traction though. I want to make sure that I'm going to take a straight shooter approach with all our investors. This is what we're doing. Here's how we're doing. I'd rather kind of under promise a little and over deliver.
I appreciate
Some
that.
companies would, yeah, no, some companies will announce, proof of concepts or trials, or that they walked around the stadium and make it sound like there's a big deal they're coming. I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna, as I've said before, I'm gonna announce pragmatic process, pragmatic steps, and pragmatic delivery of where we are as a business. My intent is to grow a long-term sustainable business here, right? This is not, also when we think about this isn't just like buying an alarm system for your home, right? This is a much more complex experience that we're putting in place, right, to make sure we're improving both patron safety and patron experience. In terms of references with customers, you asked something very specific, John. Many of our customers who've used the technology are willing to talk one-on-one to other customers
Okay.
who are
Okay.
looking at buying and adopting. So we're making those kinds of connections, and that's been very successful
Yeah,
because
that's
most of them are having a positive experience.
yeah. I mean, then you don't have to start off with square one with every customer. You can kind of
Yeah.
use those customers.
Yeah. And what you find in certain industries, like, whereas, I don't know, the Kansas City Chiefs don't want to say to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers what they're doing in terms of their offense this week and how they're actually going to go run a West Coast offense to beat them. They are willing to share what they're doing to ensure patron screening and patron security,
Yeah,
right?
that makes sense.
The casinos are doing the same thing because they're in a crisis mode right now. There's
Yeah.
almost a shooting every week in a casino,
Hmm.
right? So they are willing to share best practices with each other, and we're helping facilitate that.
Awesome. Yeah, it especially makes sense with Vegas. It's if there's a shooting at one casino, it's not like people going to Vegas. Oh, we'll just go to the other casinos. It's
No,
yeah.
it's not. And what you're finding is, the statistics are not published very broadly, but there are so many, and most of them are accidental discharges. There's so many shootings that are going on in casinos right now. It's out of control. By some estimates, as many as 30 to 40 people are carrying a gun in a casino.
Wow.
The last thing you want to do is get a bad hand from the blackjack table, and then all of a sudden you've got an incident, right?
Yeah. So just got a couple more here. As far as the mods, you mentioned in your last webinar that you had the first sale of mods in May.
Yeah.
I was kind of under the impression that mods were more of a rental business model because kind of the nature or the target market is more of a temporary outdoor venues, things that are going to be there like a county fair or an outdoor concert where they can drop in security right when they need it. 2 weeks later, it can be taken away. They only have to pay for it right at that time.
Yeah.
Can you give us a little more insight into this as far as, what type of business model it is and how it all works?
Well, I think it's a great question. First off, the mods is a really great platform for our technology. Um, and originally, I think it was intended to be that sort of for those kind of transit events, like the 2 week state fair in Texas, right?
Hmm.
Or the PGA event over the weekend. But what you're starting to see is people start thinking more and more about security. They're looking to push the perimeter out further. And where they have the opportunity in the room, right? Why not push the perimeter out as far as you can, say into a middle of a parking lot, and use some
Hmm.
of that area in the parking lot for a team sanctioned tailgating type area and experience environment, right? And so then you put those mods out there, and they become more of a permanent placement. Now, not every stadium has that capability. They
Hmm.
may not have that sort of that area out in front of the stadium. And so, maybe their door is back right up to the street and things like that. So now you've got a nice combination of different form factors where I can push the perimeter out at a permanent placement, or I can have it in the lobbies with the standalone towers. So it's all just part of kind of a different form factor to be able to accommodate what the customer is looking for and maximize their security operations, and again, maximize the experience. So imagine you're walking up to a very large, I don't know, NFL venue, for argument's sake, right?
Hmm.
And there's this huge open kind of concourse area out in front of the stadium. And now what they're doing is they've got some of these mods systems. They've got advertising on them. They've got directional information that can tell you go left or go right if you're looking to buy a ball cap, right? You've got kind of vendors and things going on in this whole concourse area. Maybe you've got sign, areas where you can get signatures from players and things like that. So it allows the venue operators a lot more options, right?
Yeah. So then you can either buy or rent these, or is
I think the issue is not so much whether it's a buy or rent.
okay.
The issue is it can be for a temporary period of time, or it could be for a permanent placement.
Okay. Okay. Um, so I think I have just one more question. Well, one and a half. So many investors like myself, and actually I was talking with Karen about this just before you came in. Um, we live in the U.S., right? You're a Canadian company, but you have a lot of investors in the U.S. and other countries as well.
Mhm.
But specifically in the U.S., we've started to see a lot of venues, and I'm sure you've seen this with you being on the road in the U.S., move towards 100% capacity in stadiums and casinos and things like that.
Mhm.
Um, can you tell us, are you seeing similar things in Canada, or is it much different? Can you elaborate maybe a little bit on that?
Well, I'm very pleased to say that my Montreal Canadiens, when they beat the Leafs the other night, actually were allowing fans in the stadium for the first time at 10% capacity. So in
Okay.
Canada, you are starting to see the same sort of thing. I think, and you're going to start to see it in other places around the world. It really becomes a matter of one, um, what percent of the population is vaccinated? Two, are you still seeing a lot of kind of COVID outbreaks? And, is that on an incline or a decline? And each state, each province, each country, whether in Europe or anywhere else around the world, is making kind of their own decisions on how they want to open, when they want to open, based on a
Hmm.
number of different factors. So the good news is, we are starting to see at different rates openings of these environments, and in concert with that, we're also seeing those environments also rethinking what they want to do about patron screening.
Gotcha. So last question, kind of an open-ended one to you, is there anything else that or actually, oh, I'm sorry, I have one more, if I could sneak one in before I give you the open-ended question. What would you say is kind of the main thing that sets Patriot One apart from their competitors?
Wow, great question. I was asked that on a conference call the other day with some 50 stadiums or so. I'm going to go better, faster, cheaper, right? Better. Third parties have validated our technology and found the accuracy level and what we can detect down to, and is much better. There are certain leagues that require, for example, the ability to detect small knives. Has to be there. It's part of the DHS Safety Act certification. We do that. The others don't. So there's huge differentiator there too, plus other technology capabilities of things we detect that the others can't, and won't. So, better, faster. Our alert rates are much, much better. And I'll come back to the scenario. You've got 60,000 people coming in the stadium. You can't take seconds to alert. You need to do that in milliseconds.
Hmm.
Otherwise, your security operations becomes a non-starter for the business. Cheaper, our model is built to align to how the customers are going to get on this journey and grow together with us as they continue to change and enhance their overall security operations. And so there's a much better fit and alignment to their business model. So those would be the three that come to mind just off the top of my head.
Awesome. So then just last question, is there anything else that you would like Patriot One shareholders to know, or you'd like to just say to shareholders at this time?
There's a lot of things I'd like to say. First off is thank you for your patience. It's been a long journey. And I think we all, myself, the investors, the executive team, the staff, we all understand what the potential for the business is. There's no doubt about it. We are in a situation where the world wants to protect their patrons, and they have to screen those patrons, but they have to do the right experience around those patrons. But it's been a bit of a journey. But the journey is the same as every other technology company. I've worked in a bunch of venture cap companies, and it took from the day we got funding to by the time we had a product out the market, it took a good 3 to 4 years to have something that was really ready for the market. Not just technically, but it was deployable, usable, easy to use, all those kinds of things. We're at that point as a company, and so it's been a 3-year journey. And I know a lot of the investors are frustrated and impatient. The good news is we are seeing the progressive steps in the right way at the right time. As the market's reopening, our product is ready to go, and third parties are validating it works very, very, very well. We're driving as hard as humanly possible, right? Here we are on Memorial Day, and I'm on 15 calls today with 15 customers to get as much of that business as possible and help the customers kind of go through the decision cycles. So we're in a good place. We're in a really good place as a business. I just want to thank our investors for their patience along the journey, and watch our dust. We're moving hard and fast now.
All right. Well, that sounds good. Again, thank you for taking the time out of your day. I know you're busy. You said you got 15 calls, so I'll let you get to that. But thanks for coming on the channel. Thanks for doing this and taking the time out of your day. I really appreciate it.
It's always a pleasure, John. Thank you for inviting me.
All right. Have a good one, Peter.